Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show. This is so true. I mean, I wanna. So for a person for whom the never mind, the touching of the nose. Let's say it's not there anymore, but for a person for whom the pinching of the nose is just a chore, they don't have to, right? They can just.
No, they don't.
For me, I would rather just, all right, stopping my breath, and not.
Yeah.
Like this. So it's okay.
Yeah. Of course.
So the BOLT test. So BOLT stands for, I always forget.
Body oxygen level test.
Yeah. And so when you do the BOLT test, I would like to clarify, because I've seen some people ask this question. You take a small breath, inhale through the nose, a small exhale, stop your breath, and then you time it.
Yes.
And when the first urge to breathe comes. So that little thing, the first urge, does it have to be the subtlest, or there is a
no? Yeah. So basically, the only reason that I say to people is to take a small breath in is because normally if I tell somebody to take a breath in, they're taking a big breath. So in reality, we want people to take a normal breath in and a normal breath out through their nose. So they're just breathing out a normal breath to functional residual capacity. And then they hold their breath. And they're timing it in seconds. How long does it take for the brain to react? So you can imagine that as you stop breathing, at some period of time, the brain is going to send an impulse to breathe. And you experience it normally with an involuntary contraction of the diaphragm. And the diaphragm breathing muscle is also, it's linked with the upper airway dilator muscles here. So it may feel like a swallow. So if I was to repeat it again, it's a normal breath in and out through the nose, and you're holding your breath, and you're timing it in seconds until you feel the first involuntary movement of the muscles or the first definite desire to breathe. Now, there's a couple of seconds difference between the first definite desire to breathe and the first involuntary movement of the breathing muscles, but not everybody can feel the first involuntary movement of the breathing muscles. And so when people resume breathing, the breath should be fairly normal. So it's not a breath hold time for as long as possible. It's a comfortable breath hold time.
Now the BOLT score will change even throughout a single day, right?
Yes. And the most important breath hold time is the one that's measured first thing in the morning. So as soon as we wake up in the bed, to sit up in the bed, allow our breathing to settle, to take our BOLT score. Now, very interesting study on this in 2018. So just a few years after the book, The Oxygen Advantage, by a Professor Kiesel. And he's from Evansville University. And he studied 51 subjects, and they were 27 years of age. And he asked, how can we have a screening tool to detect for breathing pattern disorders? It was more for the athlete population, but for any population. And he used the BOLT score, exactly how the BOLT score was measured. His conclusion was that if your BOLT score is above 25 seconds, there is an 89% chance that dysfunctional breathing is not present.
And you can make it go there. Let's say you take your BOLT score and it's only 10. You can take steps to making it more than 25.
Yes. Yeah. And, it's really about, number one is the foundation with nose breathing. So nose breathing, it's just, that goes without saying. Like people often train in developing the diaphragm or greater amplitude of the diaphragm, but they don't necessarily switch to nose breathing. And if I asked you now, Adiel, if I said to you, breathe in through your mouth and look down at your chest, you will see straight off that mouth breathing is always going to cause activation of the upper chest. So nose breathing is the foundation. Nose breathing during rest, during physical exercise and sleep. And then for periods of time during the day, we have people breathe light to breathe less air, but all we bring in with that lateral expansion and contraction of the lower ribs. In other words, we do need low breathing, but it's the way we look at it is light, slow, and deep. So for the 1990s teenagers, L.S.D, they probably won't forget that one. So it's light is the biochemistry, slow is about the speed of breathing, and deep is about amplitude of the diaphragm. And it's bringing all three together.
So those lower ribs, let's say the two ribs that are there, you want them to expand forward, but also to the side, right?
Correct. When we take a breath in, that's generally we want it driven by the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is the main breathing muscle that's separating the chest from the abdomen. Now, as we take a breath in, our diaphragm is moving downwards and the intercostal muscles are pulling out. So when we talk about the lower two ribs, we're talking about the 9 and 10, but basically it's the ribs at the sides that as we breathe in, we have lateral expansion. And as we breathe out, we have lateral contraction. And the reason that this is very important is because it gives us a gauge of the generation of what's called intra-abdominal pressure, because it takes intra-abdominal pressure to push the ribs outwards. Now, as you said correctly, we don't just have movement to the sides. We'll also have some movement to the front and some movement to the back. But I typically now have my students have their hands on the sides, because oftentimes when I ask them to put their hands to the front, they kind of push out their belly and draw it in. And then I'm never sure, is their belly moving because of the movement of the diaphragm or because they're pushing and pulling the belly?
So this is an important point. It's not so bad now, but in the 1980s and the 90s, there was a culture of gyms and muscle, and not that there isn't now. And one of the, the poster boys of all of that was your stomach is pulled in, you're walking around, you're very muscular. Yeah. So, when you tell a person like that, okay, let your stomach expand out, say, what? No way. I have a tight stomach. I'm not going to let it out.
Yeah, but we have to consider, what does the diaphragm do? Like, the diaphragm breathing muscle is not just for breathing. That diaphragm breathing muscle is there to provide stabilization for the spine. So if a weightlifter, if they're lifting a weight, they typically breathe in and hold their breath. And as the diaphragm moves downwards, the abdomen becomes almost like a pneumatic balloon. And that's to brace, that's to provide stabilization. And it's our breathing and how we breathe that impacts the generation of the pressure. And if we have dysfunctional breathing patterns, we don't create optimal intra-abdominal pressure, and it affects our movement, and we are more at risk of injury. So so those big guys with plenty of muscles, you want to get your breathing right too.
Yeah, and if this gets around like it should, like everybody in the whole world starts using it, we are all going to benefit, except for a small group of people that do the horror films in Hollywood where the guy is on the phone and he's heavy breathing. Forget it. There's no more. You can't hear. What is he doing? You can't hear. But that's just a small group, I think.
Sure.
So one thing that people would be absolutely gaga over is here we're talking about breathing, air, and yet there is a way, if we do it right, we actually lose weight. Now that's a big word. That's a big sense. So can you talk about that a little bit?
We don't fully know. It was just kind of over the years that we realized that when people were changing their breathing patterns, that their appetite was reducing. And I don't fully know the reasons why, but I'm going to put a couple of out there. It's very common for people to have disrupted sleep, and obstructive sleep apnea, just to give you some statistics on it, men age between 30 and 50 years of age, it affects 26%. So that's almost 1 in 4. Well, it's 1 in 4. And men between 50 to 70 years of age, it's 43%. So it's almost 1 in 2. Females, it's 9% between the ages of 30 and 50. But once the woman is postmenopause, it triples, 300% increase. Now, if we stop breathing during our sleep, it plays with hormones. And one hormone is leptin, and the other hormone is ghrelin. And leptin is a good hormone in that it suppresses appetite, but ghrelin is not so good because it promotes appetite. So you have an individual who is, say, stopping breathing during sleep, and then they wake up and they're really got a voracious appetite. and they eat more, and they, as a result, they put on weight. This is impinging the movement of the diaphragm. This is causing more upper chest breathing, leading to greater collapse of the upper airway, and it's a vicious circle. So I often use this as an explanation for the impact of how we breathe on just even snoring. Number one is there's two types of snoring. One is breathing through the mouth, and it goes like this. And that's why there's vibration of the soft palate. And of course, once we get the mouth closed, you can't mouth snore, so it stops. Now, the next snoring is turbulence inside the nose and the nasopharynx, where the nose meets the back of the throat. And it goes something like this. Okay. Now, when I usually work with my students, I say to them, now what I want you to do is really breathe slow. And I want you to really slow down the speed of air coming into your nose. And at the top of the breath, really have a slow and relaxed breath out. Now, as you breathe slowly, try and snore. So as you're really slow breathing in, and at the top of the breath, a total relaxed breath out, and you will typically see that it's very difficult to snore when your breathing is slow. So we need to look at the airway, and I'll come back to food, but we need to look at the airway from a point of view of an engineer. No engineer is going to look at a tube without looking at flow. But at the moment, it seems that all of the emphasis in sleep is all about the tube. How big is the tube? What can we do to increase the tube, the diameter of the tube? Now, when we have the mouth when we have the mouth closed with the tongue in the roof of the mouth, we are helping to open up the airway when the mandible is brought forward. But we also need to look at flow. We need to teach breathing exercises to make people, give them the tools that they can breathe lighter during sleep. Less resistance to breathing, less hypopnea, less sleep apnea, and then this is impacting the mess up of hormones. So for example, then they can start on a journey of recovery, because sleep apnea, it's affecting so many people. It's implicated in 20% of road traffic accidents because of driver fatigue. Now, if you were to apply the impact of this to a corporate world, it has to be absolutely immense. And the thing about this is that the standard of treatment is a CPAP machine, which is the gold standard of treatment. But the drop-off rate is 50%. 50% of people who are prescribed with a CPAP, they cannot tolerate it. And that's why, I wrote that article during the week and I submitted it for publication, because why we have to look at breathing, because those 50% of individuals, let's give them the tools for better sleep. And also the question here is, can we have good concentration and mental health if we don't have a good night's sleep? And we know that obstructive sleep apnea and insomnia go together often. As high as 67% of people with obstructive sleep apnea have insomnia. And when both of them happen together, the risk of depression is so much more. And I have people coming in with depression. And I speak with them and I say to them, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? And they tell me that they wake up feeling absolutely exhausted. And they have woken up exhausted, not just this morning, but for months and for years. Now, I think what's happening is that all too often, people are thinking that it's the depression which is causing the exhaustion. And maybe we should be asking the question, it's the poor sleep quality, mouth breathing, fragmented sleep, insomnia, not able to switch off, stuck in that sympathetic activation, which is causing exhaustion, which is contributing to anxiety, which is contributing to depression. And then...
Go ahead, please.
Then we think about food. Well, what happens when we're upset? What happens when we're stressed? We will eat more. So, when we can bring the body when we can influence the autonomic nervous system, the automatic functioning of the body, and we can really influence this through the breath. For anybody, they might be saying what I'm saying is hocus pocus. Just put it to Google, put into PubMed, and put in heart rate variability as a clinical measure of stress that's recognized. Because, we as human beings, if we get stressed, and if I go to my doctor and if I said to my doctor, I feel stressed, typically and traditionally, the doctor doesn't have a way to measure it. But the doctor could measure it. with heart rate variability. So it's a clinical measure of, it's also a measure of balance. It's the measurement of autonomic nervous system. And individuals who are not well emotionally or physically unwell typically have lower heart rate variability. And we can improve this HRV by slowing down breathing, nasal breathing, reduced breathing.
You know, the more I listen to you, it blows my mind really when I think about the whole picture. You know, EPO with bike riders, they spend thousands of dollars on shady doctors. We pay for trainers and gyms, and here is a thing, doesn't cost any money.
Yes.
Free, it's available to us. You don't have to go to the gym, your nose is right here.
Yes.
But
I think that's the problem. I was at a conference, and it was a conference of orthodontists. Another James Nestor was there, the author of the current book, Brett. And it was about 10 of us. We were a panel discussion, and the question arose because none of this information is new. And it was more so with children, because since 1909, it has been known that mouth-breathing children, it was written about in a journal at that time called Dental Cosmos, that the child is unattentive in school, that the face is dull and expressionless, that the child is not concentrating, that the teeth are overcrowded. None of this is new. And when the question came up, nobody really answered the question. And I said one thing, I said, the only reason, I said, this is never going to change. And the only reason that this will change is if people are promised to make money from the change. And, you know, it's commercializing breathing, scaling breathing. It's just not that product, but that shouldn't be what it's about, because it should be about, if we think about this, I think it's a car crash waiting to happen with children. And I can send you on any of these papers. If any of your listeners were to look at Karen Bonuck, so Karen, K-A-R-E-N, B-O-N-U-C-K, and look at her study of 11,000 children in Stratford-upon-Avon that was published in the journal Pediatrics in 2012, that she concluded it was a longitudinal study, a 40% increased risk of special education needs with mouth breathing as a contributory factor. What is the cost of that, socially, economically, and morally?
So I really hear what you say. I mean, I was marveling at how cheap and available it is. It's right here on our face, and then you turn it back and nobody's making money here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a way, for example, let's say, I'm just making up a story here.
Sure.
Let's say you can get, the coveted job if your bold score is more than 30. Now, you will make more money, things like that.
Yes, yeah. And this is true, because I will tell you my story. I was in university, and I got into a university in Dublin. It's called Trinity College Dublin. And for me to get there, the amount of study that I had to do was incredible, because I didn't have the focus and I didn't have the concentration because of poor sleep. And I was a chronic mouth breather. I was always in that fight or flight, and my mind was always active. And I would be looking at material, and I wouldn't be absorbing the information because I was stuck in my head the entire time. Like, we're sent to school, we're doing education, but we're not taught how to concentrate. And when we look at the impact of sleep, sleep is what is impacting our concentration. Concentration and our academic ability is not based on our intelligence. It's influenced by factors outside of our intelligence. And one of those factors is sleep. But the other factor is our ability to focus. But we can't focus without sleep. And it's often that our brain has been trained to decipher, to analyze brain information, to be how to think, but we have not trained how to think. And your point earlier on, you said, we want to bring breathing into our way of life. Because let's look at what's happening now. Let's look at what's happening with modern technology, with kids that are spending 2 hours a day on social media, that Platforms are consuming their time, increasing anxiety. They're looking at perfect bodies. They're looking at perfect faces. There's so much pressure now put on these younger kids. It's time, if you can spend 2 hours on your platform, looking through different social media platforms, it's time to spend a little bit of time giving attention to ourselves. And one of the best things that I ever did was taking my attention out of my mind onto my breathing. It's one of the most beautiful things. This is not just something for a bunch of hippies or a bunch of tree huggers. This is for people who want to be resilient, who want to better cope with stress, who want to have a better night's sleep. Because when the mind is racing, we don't have the focus to place our attention on what we need to place it upon.
You just talked about opening a giant door here, because one of the buzzwords these days is mindfulness. And many people say, oh, I read it everywhere. How can I be mindful? Oh, you meditate like this, you meditate like that. But here, we are breathing all the time. Just start there. You said something beautiful once that I heard. You said you're in a park. It's a beautiful park. You don't even see it. You don't see it. You're busy in your mind.
Yes,
but if you're slowing it down and you're in your breath, you do, oh, that's beautiful. You're there.
Yes, yeah. And, this has been studied. Young athletes who were doing exams and they were taught slowing down their breathing to 6 breaths per minute, and they performed better in the exams. And this is known even with a Stroop test dating back to the 1930s, a psychological test of reaction. You've got 120 words, you've got 2 minutes, words of color, you've got 2 minutes, and there's a little bit of stress on you. But individuals who are focusing on their breathing, they had less errors and they had faster reaction time. We have to train the brain. And some people, Adiel, have this naturally. Like I remember, I'm 48 years of age, and it's 30 years ago almost since I was at university. But I remember when I was in my about 20 years of age, I was after studying 3 months for an exam. And I often use this as an example because I want to try and get some information out there that people can get through their exams easier than what I did. I remember studying 3 months for an exam, and the last 20 minutes I was doing a little bit of a crash, just refreshing before I went in. And a friend of mine, he didn't open a book because he was setting up a business. His name was Terry Clune. He came in and he said, do you have any notes? And I said, I do. I handed him my notes, and I remember him looking at my notes with a state of concentration. And I knew he wasn't just looking at the notes. He was absorbing the material. The two of us went off, we did our exam, and he got the same grade. Now, if you put in Terry Clune into Google, you will see what he has achieved as a 49 or 50-year-old. He's 1,200 employees. He's in the financial services industry. He's an innovator. He's creative. He's a great employer. And that was a measure, because any person who performs any great feat, if it's in sports, even if it's in family life, if our mind is racing, we are not just polluting our own mind, but we are polluting the environment around us. So no matter whether it's corporate world, sports, family life, we have to have the ability to focus and concentrate. And the breath is a good place to start with that.
Yeah, and I even go back to a subject called, we walk around most of the time dehydrated. Most of us don't drink as much. In fact, I was once told that the thirst mechanism is the one faulty, whatever it is. So, people can say, no problem, you just drink more, but somehow we don't. Well, you said when you breathe and you exhale through the mouth, there is so much more that you put out in terms of water. So just breathing through the nose already is also, no matter how you think of it, so you don't dehydrate as much if you breathe through the nose.
Yeah. The nose is not just for breathing in. When we take air into the body, the nose is warming, moistening, filtering. It's and also then there's an energy expended by the body and conditioning that air as it comes into the lungs. But then as we breathe out, the body is recovering that heat and moisture. So the body through the nose, as we breathe out through the nose is recovering the heat and moisture that the body has expended. The human body is so intelligent, and mouth breathing is a relatively recent phenomena. We haven't been breathing through our mouth for all that long, maybe 200 years. You know, the first documented cases that I'm aware of is going back 400 years. This is when anthropologists unearthed the graves of people from upper middle class backgrounds in Europe who had access to sugar. And they knew by the shape of the face that they were mouth breathers because they had high narrow palate, jaw set back, and overcrowding of teeth. And here's how many children now are needing orthodontic treatment. The problem is not that the teeth are too big. The problem is that the jaw is too small. And the issue with this is that if the jaw is too small, there's not enough room for the tongue. And if there's not enough room for the tongue, where is that tongue going to go? But into the airway. And that's going to contribute to resistance to breathing during sleep.
Oh, this is like, you know, it makes you want to get on the roof and shout it so that everybody hears it. So, you know, you mentioned nitric oxide, and that's an extremely benefit. I mean, you know, it has some, but, you know, the molecule of the year and all of that stuff, it's beneficial.
That's right.
Now, apparently when we hum, we make a lot more of it. Is that because of, you know, the vibrations of the whole system?
Yeah, it seems to be that the nitric oxide is coming from the paranasal sinuses. So these are cavities surrounding the nasal cavity. And they're air pockets. And basically when we hum, we're vibrating the nasal cavity, which in turn then is emptying nitric oxide into the nasal cavity. So the whole aspect would be to take a normal breath in through the nose and then a prolonged hum. So you really prolong the gentle, slow hum. But then at the end of the hum, make sure you breathe in through your nose because you want to carry that nitric oxide then into your lungs.
Into your blood. So now I'm going to ask somewhat of a disgusting question, but I think it's important. Sure. So I've been talking to people and kids and people say, okay, I want to go to bed and I want to sleep through my nose, but I have to do something because my nose is kind of plugged up. So I take saline solution or neti pot, or I blow from here. Okay, good. But sometimes I do all of that. It clears it up greatly. But at the base, here and here, I still have, for lack of a better word, boogers, hard stuff. So, I mean, they say that they have an urge to put a finger in there, like we're not supposed to do, and kind of physically.
Yeah.
What do you think of all of that? And am I being a little too, disgusting here?
Well, it's normal during the day that one side of the nose is partially congested. That's very normal. And even during sleep, when you lie down, the side of the nose closest to the pillow is more congested. And that's typically why we toss and turn, or we change from sleeping on the left to the right and vice versa. So not for people to expect your nose to be 100% free. If you want to decongest your nose, do the breath holding that we spoke about earlier. If your nose feels stuffy, take a normal breath in and out through your nose, pinch your nose, hold your nose, and walk around holding your breath until you feel a medium to strong air hunger. Then let go and breathe in through your nose. Don't stress your body with it, and don't do it if you're pregnant or if you have serious medical conditions. But otherwise, it's very, very safe, very natural thing to do. It's been known since 1923 that when we hold our breath, we open up the nose. If you do physical exercise with your mouth closed, your nose will run a little bit, but your nose does open up. And if you do want to, for example, rinse out your nose, what you want to do is you want to bring in water. So say, for instance, you get good quality sea salt, typically gray, unrefined, not processed sea salt, or maybe Himalayan sea salt, the pink salt, and dissolve a little amount of it, maybe a half a teaspoon, a small spoon, half a small spoon in a glass of boiling water, and allow it to cool. And then just pour the water into the palm of your hand, into one palm of your hand, and snort the water up into your nose. But you need to get the water through the turbinates here and down the back of the nose here, because this is where bad breath can originate. Because if the airway is anyway compromised here, you can have stagnation of mucus, for example, and you want to bring that water right down the back of the nose, back down the throat, and hock it and spit it out. So yeah, it sounds a little bit gross, but it's actually very pleasurable. It's fine to do. And that combined with nose breathing, the one thing about the nose is the more we use it, the better it works for us.
You mentioned in some cases using something that's an alkaline, agent like sodium,
Bicarbonate soda.
Can you talk about it for just a second?
Yeah, it's it's a good tool, especially if people feel that their breathing is a little bit stubborn, and if they feel that even though they're slowing down their breath, that they could do with a little bit of a push in it, is to just get good quality bicarbonate of soda, baking soda. We call it bread soda. You call it, I think, baking soda, and get about a half a teaspoon. It doesn't have to be all that much, and just you can put it into apple cider vinegar. If you put it into apple cider vinegar, it'll kind of explode a little bit. Wait for the fizzing to go down, and then just take it as a shot. Or you could just put it into a small glass of water and just drink it. And you'll notice that it has an effect on your breathing in that it slows down your breathing. Your breathing will be lighter as a result of taking the bicarbonate. Now, I wouldn't do it every day, but I would certainly do it if your progress is a little bit stubborn.
So what you write about, what you talk about, it's so clear, and yet people would love to have some instruction. We all would like. So how do we find an instructor where we live that you trained if we feel like, yes, I can do it all on my own, but I'd love to have somebody show me the ropes?
Sure. Yeah, we've got 200 instructors on oxygenadvantage.com, and you'll find them once you go in and I'm not sure what the link is, but probably learn it and find an instructor, and then you'll see different countries where they're based. And there's other resources there, like we've online training and like the books. But the instructors there, you'll find them. They're on that link.
Now, nowadays, because of the COVID, a lot of stuff is done via Zoom, so the physical distance is not as important.
Yes.
Are you yourself too busy, or do you also do one-on-ones with people?
I don't do the one-on-ones. My workload has been just unbelievable. And I suppose I'm concentrating on getting this new book across the line and, different things, but it's really been amazing. As one person said to me a few months ago, Patrick, it took you 20 years to be an overnight success. And that's sometimes the way I feel with it, that it was trickling away, and then it just catapulted. Now I give small group classes, and typically what I'll do is I'll have, say, 15 people, and it's 2 hours that I'm giving them instruction, and I'm guiding through the process. So a complete class with theory, and that's when Zoom can be to my advantage. But that would be normally how I would train anyway. Even in my studio, I would train typically a small group of people, because I think it's just better. I think it's like a yoga instructor. It's nice that I'm not just focusing on one person looking at their breathing, because people can get stressed if we're just attentive to one person's breathing. But if we're going from person to person to person, giving them a little bit of feedback, and everybody is listening, we all learn from it.
So if there's a group of, let's say, 15 or 20 people, and they want to be trained by you, we get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I've got a course coming up in the 1st of October, and then there's probably one about 3 or 4 weeks later. So I give them every few weeks, I give one of those courses. And I have courses then specific on sleep apnea. So people will attend just for sleep problems. And then courses for anxiety, because it's a little bit different working with people with anxiety and panic attack, because the air hunger can put them into a fight or flight response. So I have to change it. And then for asthma is another one. And our children's course is completely free. So I've put all of the videos for kids are free up on YouTube. You just put in my name, put in breathing exercises children, and any of you with, if child has stuffy nose, you'll see all the exercises. So yeah, I got my daughter, she's 10 years of age. And between the two of us, we created 9 videos for kids.
Oh, that's lovely. So your new book is going to come soon. It's a big one. I can't wait. Does it have a name already?
Well, it's called Breathing, but I'm not sure what the subtitle is. So you know yourself, I'll submit it, and by the time the editors come through, like they might have, they'll have their own ideas. So yeah.
Well, Patrick, I mean, I am so thankful. I know how busy you are, and rightfully so. This needs to get out. Very, very thankful that you found, the time to speak to us. What we talked about here is going to be extremely useful to a lot of people. I want to thank you incredibly much for being with us today. We always learn, I always learn so much, and I can hope that this will shape and change the lives of some people. That's very, very kind of you.
Thank you so much, Eddie. It's my pleasure to talk to you. It was a great conversation.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me today. Click the subscribe button for more video. Got a question or comment? I love questions and comments. Leave yours below.